Hey, I'm Steve Warner. I'm the lead game designer for Lorcana.
My name's Ryan Miller. I am the brand manager and co-designer of Disney Lorcana.
So the first thing I want to ask is, where did the idea for Lorcana come from? It's an easy question, right?
It is an easy question, but it's a longer story.
Well, yeah, it starts like a lot of adventures. It starts in a tavern.
Yes,
It literally
it
starts
actually
in a
does.
tavern.
The tavern was named Famous, which is where the Project Famous, our code name for the game, came up.
Yeah.
It came from a lot of our love for Villainous and our work with Disney. And there was a summit to decide sort of what was the next goal, what was our next steps, and what would be the next fun thing to do. And the idea of a TCG got thrown
Yeah,
around.
well, it's kind of like, you know, now this is before I came along, but the story goes that the Ravensburger folks had done their business for the day down in California. They went to the Famous bar, and they were kind of thinking about like what spaces do we want to be in, that sort of thing. And this idea of a trading card game came up, and it was one of those things that it described to me as like one of those like electric ideas. The air suddenly became electric, and started talking, and then from that that one night at that tavern. The adventure began, right, and then it became the process of kind of working with Disney on kind of solidifying the idea and that sort of thing. And actually, the first year-ish of work was done on the story. There was no game design for like the first year, because the most important thing is the story. We wanted to develop a world that this game lives in, so that people know that it's not just characters on cards, right? It is a world you want to explore. It's a whole storyline. Every set is telling its own part of this larger story, right? And that's really important. And then about a year in, because Steve was already working there, and Steve and I've known each other for 20 plus years now.
Oh wow, so you're good friends.
Oh yeah, no, he was in my wedding actually, yeah. And so I was doing freelance work at the time, freelance board game design. And he and I worked together on our Princess Bride game. And then towards the end of that is when he told me about Project Famous. And I was like, this is a slam dunk. I've been a Disney fan since a little boy, and a TCG fan for, since 95, 94. So this is like, it was easy enough. So it's been, and then to work with Steve, I mean, you twist my arm to work with Steve, right?
Yeah.
So
I knew I needed to get Ryan. Like, again, we've worked so long together, and we know each other really well, and we work well together.
Yeah.
So it was great to work
one of
with
those
him
relationships
again.
where we just trust each other enough, we know each other really well, and we can bounce ideas really quickly and iterate, and it's just great. And Steve is amazing at designing games and also just finding the problems. I call him a surgeon, right? He like gets in there, he finds the problem, and it's
You're the meta guy. Yeah.
Oh man, he's
Yes.
amazing. He's the best in the business, if you ask me, right? And so to work with him on this, and then so then I came on, and then that started a process. And Ravensburger was actually pretty great. They were like, take as much time as you need, get the gameplay right. We were not. I mean, this is 3 years ago now.
Yeah.
We were working on this game, and then so Ravensburger's been on this project for 4+ years, and that tells you the dedication and just the sheer amount of support that we've gotten. And so we started the process, and it was quite a roller coaster.
So it always started out as a Disney property from the get-go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
We designed it from the ground up. I mean, you start, I think, any design with like thinking about who is this for, right? Who do you want to? What is your audience for this, right? And we thought, and what do they want to do in a game like this? What would they want to do in a game like this? And so we started thinking about trading card gamers. Of course, we're heavily entrenched. We're trading card gamers for 2 decades plus. We also wanted something for the Disney fans who may not have tried a trading card game before, right? And it's just really important to have a welcoming experience for them. And so we worked really hard on a game that we feel that is very welcoming. But if you are a trading card gamer, there's a lot to find here, and that is all this guy. Because let me tell you, he's one of the best at building decks, at combos, things like that. And so he and his team have really, if you're a trading card gamer, you're going to find a lot of depth of strategy, a lot of decks to find, a lot of synergies, that sort of thing. But if you're a Disney fan, you can make your princess deck, right? You can, and you can make if you're a fan of Moana, you can have a deck with just as much Moana characters as you can find in there. You get your Chief Tui and Maui and Moana and Hei and all these other things. So we think there's something for both, and we're seeing that already. I mean, it's one of the amazing things about this game is seeing families come together to play, couples playing, like all these folks coming into their. I had a guy at Gen Con actually come to me and say that his girls had decided on their own to get better at reading, so they could play Disney Lorcana, right? It was just one of those things that I don't know if there's a better compliment to anything I've ever been a part of. So yeah.
So my question is, the collectible card game space has been around for forever, but there's some card games that are much bigger than others. What a hard space to kind of get you into to get people off those other card games. What are some of the challenges when you're designing the game so it's different enough and unique enough to get people off the other card games and try yours?
That's a good question. I think one of the things that we wanted to focus on was multiplayer games. Because I remember a conversation with Ryan. Ryan very much was like, well, families are going to want to sit down and play this.
Yeah.
So it's got to be able to play very well in multiplayer format. And that actually probably was the cause of the demise of what?
So
10,
many
10 designs?
We had at least a dozen designs, I think, that we were just like, oh, this is really fun. We get really excited about it and then get dashed to the rocks. And usually it was because that game did not support multiplayer in a way that we were comfortable with. So like, we wanted multiplayer to be no rules changes at all. You just play the game as you've learned it. And so many games that were actually really fun games, but they weren't fun for multiplayer. They needed rules changes. They needed, here's the, and that's just not what we wanted, right? And so, but I think it might surprise you to know that being different was not a goal of ours. Like we wanted, especially for trading card gamers, kind of a comfortable space and kind of speak their language when it comes to the rules. But also we wanted the theme to be elevated, right? We didn't want a game to kind of take away like a super innovative game. There's a lot of upsides to that, but one of the potential downsides is that it can distract from the theme, right? We wanted our princess decks. We wanted to just have this awesome table of just all these different characters that you have. And so that is what we want to elevate with what we did, right? So we came up with a game that we think has got a lot of fun strategic and skill testing moments, but also is out of its own way in a sense, so that the theme can flourish, right? The theme can be elevated.
There's a lot of game designs that look at other games and say, what are they doing bad and what are they doing good? And they just take the good. Was that part of your inspiration when you were making Lorcana?
I don't think so. I mean, we're aware of lots of games because we play lots of games. And,
Right, yeah.
Worked on a lot, we were both at Wizards of the Coast R&D, right? Worked on a lot of games, and so I think you get a sense for, a large part of your job as a game designer, as you well know, is like calibrating your fun meter, right? You really you got to understand what is fun to the group that you're making the game for, right? And so really it was about, delivering a fun and solid experience, and less about, trying to solve problems of other games or something like that. Because really, those are great games. I've played so many. There's a lot of great games out there, and I think that Lorcana is going to bring a lot of new people in. A lot of folks that have never played a trading card game before, and we're already seeing this, right? A lot of folks are going, "Wow, this is really fun." This is, and I guarantee you, a lot of those folks, a decent number of those folks are going to be like, "What else is there in this world?" Right? And I think that's really fun. I think that's really cool.
When you guys are designing the game, is it pen and paper, cut out things, write down, play with that, or do you guys do it digitally now in 2023?
It's a lot of pen and paper style, printouts, that sort of thing.
Handcrafted artwork.
Handcrafted art. Well, there's a couple people that like to do
The artwork's always last, though, right? It's always last.
And one of the cool things about that is that we'll get the artwork in our database, and we won't have seen it before. And so suddenly, like, everyone's at the computer looking at all of the new pieces of art that we've gotten, and we're just like, oh, that's really cool, and that's awesome, and that's amazing, and so that's always a lot of fun.
People ask me what I do, and I'm like, oh, I'm a game designer, and sometimes, so I always follow up with, I design the gameplay, because some people think I do the art, and I'm like, I'm not nearly talented enough to do the art. You do not want me drawing pictures on these cards. But we have had an amazing, we have a huge stable of freelance artists. We have a bunch of in-house art directors, and they have made this one of the most beautiful games, if not the most beautiful games I've ever worked on or seen. Yeah, really pleased. But as a game designer, like, it almost breathes life, and we got these white cards with like text and numbers, and then the art shows up, and you're like, it's just, it's just like, and you get that feeling of just flipping through a pack of cards. Even if you don't know how to play the game, you see these fun characters, you see these really exciting pieces of art, and it's just a joy. Yeah, but having that moment as game designers when we finally got the art, it was that moment of just like seeing it on the table, like, oh my god, it's amazing.
Like, the game has been first, congratulations, because the game's been a massive success. My friend owns a card store, can't keep it on the shelves. When a game does take off in a great way like this, what does that open up for you guys creatively, or like budget-wise?
I don't think it changes our creative path, because really, we're thinking pretty far ahead right now. It does start a more rich conversation, because before the game's out, we're kind of conceptualizing who's going to play this, right? And we're mostly right, but not all right. And so now that the game is out, we can really have that conversation with fans and really understand them better and start to weave that into the creative process. That's important, right? It's a living beast, this type of game, right? And we want to make sure we take good care of it, and that involves a lot of conversation, a lot of feedback and things like that. So I think if anything, that's really what the change is. But the support we've gotten from Ravensburg has been astounding. It's really great. And the team that we have here is just amazing. We have a huge team working on this from all aspects, from production and art and game design and marketing and all these folks. And they've done something that I think is very special because it's not easy. I mean, a trading card game is more complicated on just about every level than like a boxed experience, right? And for a company to go from never having done this before to dropping one of the most beautiful games ever, I think is a true testament to this team. I mean, they've really hard work and dedication.
Steve, when you were designing the game, did you have competitiveness in mind? A lot of gamers like to be really competitive.
I definitely wanted there to be like combos and strategy and something deep that the real hardcore players really wanted to sink their teeth into and get into. But I wanted that to be an option on getting into. I didn't want it to be the primary thing. So those players can go find that. They can build the really strategic decks. And I think that you're seeing that with the store tournaments and stuff going on. But I always want a mix. Like, it's a balance, right? Like, you can't get too competitive, but it is nice to have that. And you'll see a lot more as we move forward.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting aspect to the game design when it comes to the ink. And so when you play the game, you learn that ink is like the resource of the game and that cards can be used as ink instead of their normal use. But some cards can't. And it sounds like a little like detail, but it actually does a really interesting thing when it comes to what Steve's been talking about, is that by pulling the ink off of cards, it makes it more difficult to add to your decks. You don't want to put too many in. And so what that allows us to do is actually balance entire strategies. So, for example, when you talk about competitive play, one type of deck that comes to mind is what we would call a control deck, right? And that's a deck that is all about controlling your opponent, right? And it's interesting because control decks are actually kind of important to have because they keep other types of decks in check. But if control becomes too dominant, it's actually really unfun. It's not a great experience, especially for new players, right? And so what we have been able to do, as an example of this concept, is take the ink off a lot of the control cards. So that when you're building a control deck, you have to be very careful about how much of those types of cards you include. And that's really a neat aspect that I've not really seen in other designs that I think allows for some really interesting game design choices for us.
Now, like the game's out in the wild, since people are now playing it, have you seen any like combos or synergies that you didn't anticipate seeing when the game released? I know the game's still relatively new.
No, I honestly think I have a really good dev team that works really hard at this. I'm pretty sure that we had seen or done or built several of these decks that people have been playing, and we knew that they existed. And as we did that, of course, we wanted to make sure that there was always answers, right? You don't want that one deck that just becomes the thing. Yeah. So, and I think that my team's done an amazing job at making sure that stays true.
And my last question for you guys is this is Disney Lorcana. This is a Disney IP. They have a lot of other interesting IP. Any plans for that in the future that you can talk about?
Nope, none of them we can talk about.
I mean, where can people find information on how to play Lorcana? Do you guys have leagues set up, stuff like that?
I think so. On DisneyLorcana.com, we've got a series of short videos. Each one tackles kind of a different game concept. Going through all the videos only takes you probably about 12, 13 minutes, but that way you can kind of go back to a concept or kind of rewatch it. That's a really good way to learn. You can also download the app, and it's got a learn to play in there too. You can kind of go through the gameplay, that sort of thing. I'd also encourage you to go out to your local game store. A lot of those folks are happy to demo the game to you. Really the best way to learn any game, I think, is from someone who knows how to play it, right? And so I would recommend that. But if you just want to check out the videos, there's, of course, lots of YouTube videos as well that will teach you how to game. But the ones we've done, the short ones that are on our website, I think are a good start.
Because I have one more minute, I just want to ask, so this was, you said about 4 years in development, maybe a little bit longer. Was this like a COVID game that you guys kind of created together or post-COVID?
Oh, right through COVID.
Yeah, no, we did it.
So you designed during COVID?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we designed during COVID. So a lot of it was pen and paper, but there are some digital options you have for game design where you can play online and that sort of thing. And so we did a lot of that too, where we would just kind of go back and forth. Because you design the game, but then you need some like cards to kind of play and test the game out. So you design a bunch of like test cards, and you're not thinking about balance or anything like that. You just want to like, let's test this out. And so the digital options do allow us to kind of iterate a little faster, because with pen and paper, of course, you'd have to either scribble a bunch or reprint a bunch of cards or something like that. So that was in the environment of COVID, that was really helpful.
I was going to say it's useful, but playing in person is always super nice, so that you can see the actual impact of playing a card.
Oh, 100%. I mean, tabletop is what we're all about, bringing people together to play games, sit down with their friends and family. And so digital doesn't recreate the feeling of pulling a card off the top of your deck, right? Or that snap you hear when you put a card on the table, right?
Opening a pack.
Exactly, right? And so those are important parts of when we're designing the experience, right? Because the game design is only one facet of a larger experience. And so playing in person is just, there's no substitute for that. Yeah.